The air in the briefing chamber of the KSV Resolve was always a little too cold, a little too dry. It was a compromise, like everything else on the unified Galactic Coalition vessel. No atmosphere perfectly suited the avian Shur, the thick-skinned Tarkellans, the moisture-loving Sylphs, and the humans. It simply tried not to kill anyone. The pale blue light from the central holographic display painted the assembled officers in ghostly shades, highlighting the deep worry on Commander Kim Hana's face. Hana stood straight, her hands clasped behind her back. She was the captain, the human commander of this mixed crew. Her dark eyes scanned the room, taking in her team. To her left, Velt, her Chur co-pilot, shifted from foot to foot, their feathers subtly puffed with anxiety. To her right, Security Chief Rorg loomed, his massive Tarkellan arms crossed over his broad chest, a low, constant rumble in his throat that might have been patience or irritation. At the tactical console, Lieutenant Li Day was a statue. The hologram showed the Kyren debris field, a sprawling graveyard of old ships and asteroids. Overlaid on it were angry red markers, showing the last known positions of the Crother marauders. The Crother were a problem. Not a civilization, not a people, just a wave of mechanical horrors. They stripped ships and stations for parts, leaving hollow shells and frozen bodies behind. They were predictable only in their violence. The pattern is clear, Hana said, her voice calm and firm in the shared language of the Coalition. Over the last 3 cycles, the Crother have hit 4 supply convoys here, and here. She pointed with a light pen, and the hologram drew bright lines connecting the attacks. Intel suggests they are using the larger debris clusters for cover, striking fast, and disappearing back into the field. Our mission is to intercept the next attack. The Resolve and the Tarkellan frigate Stonefist will patrol this vector. A new line in friendly blue cut across the likely approach path. The room stirred. Rorg uncrossed his arms, the plates on his skin clicking. Good, a direct approach. The stone fist will take the forward position. My warriors are eager to crush these scrap piles. His voice was like rocks grinding together. From her seat at the diplomatic observer's station, the sylph named Elara spoke. Her voice was soft, melodic. The Crother do not typically engage in sustained battle, Chief Rorg. They prefer easy targets. A show of force may simply cause them to withdraw deeper into the field, prolonging the threat. Then we chase them, Rorg grunted. We break their ships and end the threat, cleanly. Velt chirped nervously. The density of the debris in Sector Theta is extreme. Sensor clarity drops by 80%. A full pursuit would be risky. Risk is the point of a warrior's life, Rorg stated, as if explaining water was wet. Hana listened, nodding. This was normal. The Tarkellan wanted a fight, the Chur wanted safety, the Sylph wanted efficiency. She looked to her tactical officer. Lieutenant Li, your assessment. Optimal weapon placements for a defensive screen? All eyes turned to Li Day. Day was known on the Resolve. He was not the loudest nor the strongest. But in 3 years of service, he had developed a reputation for solutions. Odd solutions. Last cycle, he had used a cargo shuttle's waste venting system to create a sensor-scattering cloud, allowing a damaged scout to escape. The cycle before, he had recalibrated the point defense guns to fire in alternating rhythmic pulses, confusing the targeting systems of pirate drones. His ideas were never in the standard manuals. They were always quiet, thoughtful, and a little strange. Now he was silent. Utterly, completely silent. He stood before his console, but he was not looking at the controls. His gaze was locked on the holographic display of the debris field. His face was unnaturally still. He didn't blink as much as a human should. He didn't tap his fingers, didn't shift his weight, didn't clear his throat. He was like a machine that had been powered down mid-thought. Hannah felt a first faint trickle of unease. "Lieutenant?" No response. Day's eyes were moving minutely, tracing the paths of the red markers, then flicking to the dense clusters of debris, then back to the markers. Roarg let out a snort, a puff of air that smelled vaguely of wet stone. The human is frozen. The sight of real combat often does this to their kind. Their brains overload. Velt fluttered their feathers, defensive of their crewmate. Lieutenant Lee is not cowardly. He is calculating. He is silent, Ilara observed, her large, dark eyes recording everything. She made a note on her sleek datapad. Anomalous behavior for this human in a tactical context. Noted. Hannah raised her voice slightly, the command tone cutting through. "Lee Day, report." The sound of his full name seemed to reach him. Slowly, very slowly, his eyes lifted from the display and met Hannah's, but there was no recognition there, no readiness to answer. It was as if he was looking at her from a very great distance. He gave a single, almost imperceptible shake of his head. Not a refusal, but a negation of the entire scene before him. Then his eyes dropped back to the hologram, the silence stretched. It became a physical thing in the room, thicker than the compromised air. The red blips of the Crother pulsed. The blue line of their planned patrol seemed naive, a child's drawing on a complex battlefield. Hannah had to continue. She could not let the briefing stall, because one officer had checked out. "Very well," she said, her voice tighter now. "We will proceed with the patrol vector as planned. Velt, plot the course. Roarg, coordinate with the stone fist for a staggered formation. Ilara, prepare first contact protocols, though I doubt we'll need them. Dismissed." The crew moved, the spell of Day's stillness broken by the routine of orders. Roarg shot a final disdainful look at the human tactical officer before stomping out. Velt hurried to the navigation console, eager for a task. Ilara glided out, her datapad held close. Hannah walked over to Day. She stood beside him, looking at the same display. Up close, she could see the intensity in his face. A tiny muscle twitched in his jaw. His knuckles were white where he gripped the edge of the console. This wasn't fear. This was a consuming focus so deep it had swallowed his ability to speak. "Dai," she said, quietly now, using the familiar address. "What is it?" He didn't look at her. His voice, when it finally came, was low and rough, as if unused. "It's wrong." "What's wrong?" "The pattern." He lifted a hand and pointed a finger, not at the recent attacks, but at an empty, dense knot of debris far from the convoy routes. "It's a feint, a distraction." Hannah frowned. "The intelligence is clear. 4 attacks, same signature." "Yes," they said, the word sharp. 2 same. Perfectly same. Crother are scavengers. Adaptive. Their attacks should vary. These don't. They're painting a picture. And we're looking at the picture, not at the hand holding the brush. He finally turned his head to look at her. His eyes were dark, full of a knowledge that seemed to hurt him. "Captain, this isn't a Crother pattern. This is a human pattern. It's a lure." Hannah stared at him. "A human pattern?" The Crother were machines, relics of a dead species. They didn't study human military history. The Galactic Fleet databases had no record of such a tactic from them. It was insanity. It was a hunch, a gut feeling from an officer who had suddenly gone silent at a critical moment. But she knew, Lee Day. She knew his silences were never empty. They were full of storms. She placed a hand on his shoulder. It was rigid with tension. "We have our orders, Lieutenant. Stand down from tactical. Go to your quarters. Get some rest." He looked at her for a long moment, The storm in his eyes slowly banked, replaced by a hollow frustration. He knew he had not been heard. He gave a short, sharp nod. "Yes, Captain." As he turned and walked stiffly from the briefing room, Hanno watched him go. The first red flag had been raised. It was not a flag of cowardice, as Rourke thought. It was a flag of warning, a silent, screaming alarm that only one person on the ship seemed to hear. And she had just ordered him to ignore it. The chills she felt had nothing to do with the room's temperature. The silence followed Lee Day out of the briefing room. It was a heavy cloak around him as he walked through the clean, brightly lit corridors of the Resolve. Crew members from a dozen species moved past him, but he barely saw them. His mind was still in that room, trapped in the holographic light, tracing and retracing the paths of attack. The orderly, perfect pattern burned behind his eyes. It was wrong. It was so clearly, obviously wrong that he felt a physical ache in his chest that the others could not see it. He did not go to his quarters. Instead, he went to the ship's small historical archive, a room rarely visited. The Galactic Coalition valued forward progress. The past, especially the violent, messy past of individual species, was considered a curiosity at best, a source of shame at worst. The terminal was dusty. Day activated it, his fingers moving quickly, typing in access codes he wasn't entirely supposed to have. He bypassed the main tactical databases and went straight to the restricted anthropological files. Human military history dot the screen, filled with text and images. Names of places and battles that meant nothing to anyone else on the ship. Thermopylae, Canny, Operation Desert Storm, the Battle of the Atlantic. He scrolled, his eyes scanning not for dates or outcomes, but for shapes, for the geometry of deception. He found it. A campaign from Earth's Second World War, an island-hopping strategy. Attack here, then here, then here, drawing the enemy's attention and forces into a predictable path, all while the true threat moved silently somewhere else, unseen. The pattern on the hologram was a crude copy, a child's tracing of a complex masterpiece. This is what he had seen. This is what had stolen his voice. The Crother were not acting like Crother. They were acting like humans. Or, more accurately, someone was making them act like humans. The thought was cold and terrible. Meanwhile, in her ready room, Commander Kim Hana stared at the starfield outside her window. She did not see the beautiful, cold stars. She saw Lee Day's face, that hollow, frustrated look as he left. She had commanded him to rest, but she knew he would not. He would be chasing his theory, down whatever rabbit hole his unique mind had found. She respected Day, more than respected him. In their years serving together, he had pulled victory from the jaws of disaster, more than once with his quiet, weird ideas. But this was different. This was not a clever fix for a broken system. This was a fundamental challenge to fleet intelligence. And it was based on a feeling. A chime sounded at her door. Enter. It was Security Chief Rourke. He had to duck slightly to clear the doorway. The room suddenly felt much smaller. "Commander," he rumbled, his voice formal. "Chief, what can I do for you?" "It is about the human." Lee Day. Rourke stood at a kind of attention, his hands behind his back. His performance today was unacceptable. In Tarkellan culture, silence in the face of a shared threat is a sign of either cowardice or contempt. My warriors on the stone, Fist have asked if your tactical officer is defective. It weakens our position. Henna kept her face calm. Lieutenant Day is not defective, Chief. He was processing information. He was silent, Rourke insisted. If a Tarkellan warrior has a thought about battle, he shares it. It is how the warpack strengthens itself. This human, he hoards his thoughts. It is a selfish act. I request permission to assign a secondary tactical officer from my team for the upcoming operation. For redundancy. Hannah felt a flash of anger, hot and human. She pushed it down. Denied, Chief. Lee Day is my tactical officer. I trust him. His methods are different, not wrong. Rourke's large eyes narrowed. You trust a silence? You trust a feeling? We are walking into a potential combat zone. I trust shields. I trust plasma cannons. I do not trust a quiet human. Before Hannah could answer, another chime. It was Alara, the Sylph diplomat. Please enter, Hannah said, grateful for the interruption. Alara glided in, her datapad held close. She nodded respectfully to Rourke, who gave a grunt in return. Commander Chief, I have completed my preliminary observation log of the briefing. There is an anomaly I wish to discuss regarding Lieutenant Lai. Rourke let out a louder grunt. See? Even the observer notes his failure. Not a failure, Alara corrected softly. An anomaly. My species is adept at reading biological signals. Micro-expressions, pheromone shifts, pupil dilation. Lieutenant Lee displayed none of the physiological signs of fear or confusion. His heart rate, from what I could observe peripherally, remained remarkably steady. His silence was not one of shock. It was one of hyperfocus, as if he was listening to a frequency the rest of us could not hear. Hannah leaned forward. Did your analysis suggest what that frequency might be? Alara tilted her head. No, only that he was receiving a signal. A cognitive signal. From where or what, I cannot say. But his subsequent statement to you, calling the pattern a feint, suggests the signal was a warning. I recommend further investigation before we commit to the patrol vector. Rourke threw his hands up, a gesture of frustration that was almost human. Unbelievable. Now we are listening to feelings and phantom signals. Commander, the Stone Fist expects to patrol the agreed vector. I will not tell them we are changing plans, because a human had a quiet moment, and a Sylph saw his pupils not move. The debate was cut short by a priority alert on Hannah's console. It was from the archive. A data dump request flagged by Lieutenant Lee Day. Attached was a single file, a comparative analysis, overlaying the Crother attack pattern with a historical human naval campaign from Earth. The match was not perfect, but it was haunting. The summary text from Day was brief. Asterisk pattern match, 78% congruence. Objective of historical tactic: to fix enemy attention and forces for a decisive blow from an unexpected quarter. Recommended course: scan debris cluster Theta 7 for mass shadows and power residue. Assumed trap. Asterisk Hannah read it, her blood going cold. She turned her console around so Rourke and Alara could see. Rourke stared at the scrolling text and the overlapping maps. His warrior's mind understood patterns. He saw the match. His anger faded, replaced by a slow, dawning caution. This is a human strategy? The Crother are using human tricks. They aren't. Day's voice came from the doorway. They all turned. He stood there, looking exhausted but clear-eyed. The Crother don't have strategy. They have programming. Someone has given them new programming. Or is directing them. Someone who knows how humans think about war. Someone who is using that knowledge to set a trap for a coalition force that does not think that way. The room was quiet. The idea was vast and dark. Who would do that? Hannah asked. I don't know, Day admitted. But the target isn't the supply convoys. They're the bait. The target is the warship that comes to stop the attacks. The target is us. Alara's fingers flew over her datapad. The logic is internally consistent. If one accepts the premise that the pattern is intentional mimicry, the conclusion is logically sound. The risk probability has now shifted. Rourke looked from the screen to Day. The disdain was gone from his face. It was now a look of hard calculation. A warrior who sees the trap first is more valuable than a warrior who simply fights hard. You should have spoken, human. Day met his gaze. I didn't know how to say it. I just recognized it. Like recognizing a face in a crowd. Speaking too soon would have just sounded like madness. Hannah stood up. The command posture returned to her. We have a new priority. Elara, get this data to Fleet Intelligence with a high priority flag. Rourke, inform the Stone Fist to hold position, but to go to silent running. Do not proceed down the patrol vector. Tell them. Tell them we have a potential anomaly. Day, you're with me. We're going to the bridge. We need to look at Theta 7 with every scanner we have right now. And we need to do it quietly. As they moved, a new tension filled the ship. It was no longer the simple tension of a possible fight. It was the sharper, more dangerous tension of being hunted. And the only one who had sensed it was the man who had been silent. His red flag was now seen by everyone. The race to understand the trap had begun. The bridge of the KSV Resolve was a picture of controlled tension. The usual background hum of systems felt louder, every beep from a console, a potential alarm. Commander Kim Hana sat in her command chair, her back straight, but her eyes were fixed on the main viewer. It showed the distant, jagged outline of the Chiron debris field, with a specific sector, Theta 7, highlighted in a soft yellow circle. Lee Day stood at the tactical station, his hands moving calmly over the controls. The silent, frozen man from the briefing was gone. In his place was an officer with a grim purpose. He was running passive scans only. Active sensors, like pinging with a loud sonar, would announce their curiosity to anyone or anything listening. Passive thermal scan shows? Nothing conclusive, Day reported, his voice flat. Ambient heat from debris, some residual energy from old reactor leaks. It's a mess. Perfect hiding place. At the navigation console, Velt the Chur pilot twitched. Their feathers were lying flat against their body, a sign of intense stress. Gravity mapping is also inconclusive. Too many large asteroids, too much dense metal. A ship could be hiding behind any of them. Security Chief Rourke stood near the entrance, a looming statue of readiness. He watched Day work. His earlier anger was gone, replaced by a warrior's patience. He was waiting for a target to appear. If it is there, it will not hide forever. A trap must be sprung. Elara observed from her station, her datapad forgotten. Her large sylph eyes watched the data streams, but more often she watched the crew. She saw the focused human, the anxious Chur, the poised Tarkellen, the resolute commander. A microcosm of the coalition, facing an unknown shaped by their own past. Hana made a decision. Run the historical comparison again, Lieutenant. But this time, map the likely position of the decisive blow in that human battle. Overlay it on Theta 7. They nodded. His fingers danced. On the main viewer, a new graphic appeared. The Crother attack points glowed red. A dotted line, representing the historical lure force from Earth's past, connected them. Then, a bright, pulsing white dot appeared in the densest part of the Theta 7 cluster. It was not where any attack had been. It was where the historical record said the real strike force had waited. The killing zone, Rourke murmured, understanding at once. Focus all passive scans on that coordinate, Hannah ordered. Look for anything. Light distortion. Subtle energy bleed. Anything that isn't rock. Minutes ticked by. The bridge was so quiet, they could hear the faint rustle of Velt's feathers. Then, a soft chime sounded at Day's console. It wasn't a loud alert. It was a whisper. I've got a mass shadow, Day said, his voice tight. It's Too clean. An asteroid of that size should have a more irregular gravity signature. This is smooth, consistent, like a hull. Can we confirm? Hannah asked, leaning forward. Not without an active scan. And if we ping it, and it is a ship, they'll know we're here. Ilara spoke up. There is another way. A blind probe. We launch a sensor drone on a ballistic course. It uses no power until the last moment, then takes a single rapid scan before it is destroyed. It is a tactic my people have used. It has a low chance of success, but a lower chance of detection. Roarg shook his great head. A waste of a drone. If the human's ghost is real, it will have point defenses. The drone will be dust before it sends a byte of data. Day looked up from his screen. He had that distant look again, but this time his eyes were clear. He was not lost in thought. He was retrieving a memory. We don't send a drone, he said. We send a shuttle. A stunned silence met his words. Explain, Hannah said. The historical tactic, Day continued, turning to face her. The enemy was hiding, listening. They used hydrophone's devices to listen in the water. They would ignore the big, noisy ship if it stayed far away. But they would hear the quiet screws of a submarine or the silent drift of a lifeboat. We are the big, noisy ship. We stay here, quiet but present. We send a shuttle. No active engines. No power. We let it drift on a course that looks natural, like debris shaken loose by a micro-impact. Piece of the field moving. Velt let out a small, distressed chirp. A shuttle with no power? No life support? It is a coffin for whoever is inside. It would have minimal, battery-powered life support. Enough for a few hours. And it would have a single, very powerful passive sensor array, powered by a cold cell battery. One burst of data, sent by tight beam laser the moment it has confirmation, and it goes completely dark again. Day's plan was forming as he spoke. The shuttle itself is the sensor. Its hull is the receiver. If there's a powered ship in there, it will give off a signature. The shuttle will feel it. Roarg was staring at Day with something like awe. You propose to use your own people as silent bait. To drift, helpless, into the jaws of the trap. This is a Tarkillan hunting tactic. For dangerous prey. It is a great honor and a great risk. It's not an honor, it's a necessity, Day corrected, but he gave a slight nod to Roarg. The respect was returned. I'll pilot it. I know what signature I'm looking for. I designed the historical filter. I have the best chance of recognizing it. No, Hannah said immediately. You are my tactical officer. I need you here. With respect, Captain, you need confirmation. My being here won't change the tactical picture if we're wrong. My being out there might give us the proof we need to avoid a massacre. He held her gaze. You trusted my silence. Now trust my plan. The weight of command settled on Hannah. She looked at the main viewer, at the innocent-looking debris cluster hiding a potential monster. She looked at Ilara, who gave a slow, subtle nod of approval. She looked at Roarg, who gave a single, firm nod, the warrior's endorsement. Velt, Hannah said, her voice leaving no room for argument. Plot the drift course. Make it look natural. Use the last recorded micrometeor impact in that sector as the origin point. She turned to Day. Lieutenant, you have 1 hour to prepare Shuttle 2. Battery life support only. Install the sensor package you need. You will take one other crew member for systems redundancy. Volunteer basis. Day expected to go alone. He opened his mouth to protest, but Velt spoke first, their voice a nervous warble. I will go. Everyone looked at the sure pilot. The drift course requires precise initial velocity, Velt said, smoothing their chest feathers in a self-soothing gesture. My calculations must be perfect, and and I am the best pilot to make subtle reactionary thruster adjustments if needed. Before we go dark." They looked at Day, their large eyes wide with fear, but unwavering. "The lieutenant sees the ghost. I will help him prove it is real." The plan was set. The next hour was a blur of quiet activity. While the Resolve hung in the void, a silent sentinel, the shuttle was prepared in its launch bay. All non-essential systems were stripped of power. The cabin grew cold. Day and Velt wore environment suits, the internal heaters set to minimum dot as they strapped into the shuttle's cockpit. Velt looked at the dark, powerless instruments. "I have flown many ships," they chirped softly. "I have never flown a rock." Day managed a small smile. "Think of it as gliding. Just a very, very long glide." Hana's voice came over the suit's comm, low and direct. "You have your window. Launch when ready. And Day, bring me back my proof." "And my crew." The shuttle bay doors opened. With a single short burst from its thrusters, Shuttle 2 pushed away from the Resolve. For a few minutes, Velt made tiny adjustments, aligning them on the calculated drift path. Then, with a deep breath that fogged their helmet visor slightly, they powered everything down. The lights died. The hum of the engines vanished. The control panels went black, save for a single dim battery life indicator. The only light came from the stars and the growing, jagged shape of the debris field ahead. They were now a piece of space junk, tumbling slowly, silently, into the heart of the suspected trap. The silence on the bridge of the Resolve was one of anxiety. The silence in the shuttle was absolute, filled only with the sound of two beings breathing, waiting for a monster to reveal itself. The silence inside the shuttle was not empty. It was a heavy, listening silence. Lee Day floated slightly against his harness, his eyes fixed on the small blank screen of the passive sensor suite. It was powered, drawing a tiny trickle from the cold cell battery, but it showed nothing. It was waiting, just like they were. Outside the viewport, the Chiron debris field grew from a distant sprinkling of dust and rock to a vast, terrifying wall of broken metal and stone. It blotted out the stars. Velt, the Chur pilot, had their eyes squeezed shut. Their breathing was a rapid, shallow pattern in Day's helmet comms. "I can hear my own heart," Velt whispered, the sound loud in the quiet. "It is too loud. What if they hear it? They're listening for engine signatures, magnetic fields, reactor noise," Day murmured back, his voice calm. It was a forced calm, a wall he built against the same primal fear. "They're not listening for biology. Just breathe normally." "Normal is not possible," Velt chirped, but they tried to take a deeper breath. Their drift was perfect. They tumbled slowly, end over end, just another piece of wreckage caught in the gentle tidal pulse of the larger fragments. The Resolve was far behind them now, a distant, silent guardian. The shuttle's internal temperature dropped steadily. Frost began to form delicate patterns on the inside of the viewport. Day's screen remained dark. Doubt, cold and sharp, started to creep into his mind. What if he was wrong? What if his human paranoia, his obsession with ancient, bloody history, had sent them on a suicidal drift into an empty field? He would have doomed his captain's career, wasted the fleet's time, and frozen to death in a powerless can for nothing. He pushed the thought away. He focused on the numbers. The mass shadow was there. The pattern was there. The trap was there. He had to believe it. "Thermal," he whispered suddenly. The sensor screen flickered. A faint, faint bloom of infrared, far deeper in the debris cluster than any natural source should be. It was the barest whisper of heat against the cosmic cold. Got a thermal whisper. Consistent with a powered-down ship running minimal life support or keeping engines in standby. It's there. Velt opened their eyes, looking at the screen. The tiny blip of data gave them a focus, something other than fear. Can we get closer? For better data? Our course is set. We can't adjust without power. They watched as their drift carried them on a path that would bring them within 50 kilometers of the suspected source. It was close. Dangerously close for a blind, silent object. For an hour, they drifted, the tension winding tighter with each passing minute. The thermal signature grew slightly more defined. Then, a new signal appeared on Day's screen. A subtle rhythmic pulse in the local magnetic field. The kind of pulse made by a ship's powerful gravitic stabilizers, cycling on a low power mode. Confirmation, Day breathed, his heart hammering against his ribs. That's a stabilizer cycle. Not an asteroid. A ship. A big one. He began to prepare the data burst. All the sensor logs, the thermal image, the magnetic pulse. One press of a button would send it laser-type back to the resolve. Then, Velt stiffened. Movement. At 270 relative. A small object. It changed course. Day's head snapped up. Through the frosted viewport, he saw it. A Crother patrol drone. A small, spider-like thing of black metal and sharp edges. It was moving on a steady search pattern, its red sensor lens glowing like a single evil eye. And now it was turning. Its nose was aligning directly with their tumbling shuttle. It saw us, Velt said, their voice trembling. It saw a glint of starlight on our hull. Or our tumbled mass is just wrong enough. They're coming to look. Stay still, they said, the command automatic. But they were already still. They were a rock. A frozen dead rock that the drone approached. It moved with a predatory grace, closing the distance quickly. Soon, it was close enough that they could see the intricate, horrible details of its construction. It slowed, matching their tumble, keeping them in the center of its sensor gaze. The red lens glowed, scanning. Day's hand hovered over the data burst button. If he sent it now, the tight laser would be a flare in the dark to the drone's sensors. They would be exposed, and the dreadnought would know it had been found. The trap would be sprung early, and the resolve would be rushing into a prepared battle. If he didn't send it, and the drone identified them, they would die, and the resolve would have no warning at all. The drone extended a thin, articulated arm, tipped with a cutting laser. It was going to take a sample. To probe the strange piece of debris in that moment, A's mind did not race. It became very, very clear. He remembered a story. An ancient Earth submarine, depth-charged, its crew pretending to be dead, letting their ship sink into the icy dark, making no sound, no movement, playing a corpse. It was called a dead fish maneuver. Velt, Day said, his voice utterly calm. On my mark, we kill everything. I mean everything. Life support battery, sensor battery, suit heaters. We go completely dark and cold. We are not a shuttle. We are not alive. We are a frozen, hollow piece of wreckage. Do you understand? Velt was petrified, but they trusted the calm in the human's voice. They nodded. I understand. Now. Day's fingers flew. He shut down the passive sensor, cutting the last trickle of internal power. He switched his suit heater off. A shocking, instant cold seized his body. On his console, Velt did the same, shutting down the final backup circuits. The shuttle went from being a barely living thing to a truly dead one. The last faint hum vanished. The dim light on the battery indicator died. The frost on the viewport thickened. The only light was the baleful red glow of the drone's sensor, now peering in at them. The drone's cutting arm paused. It scanned again. Its internal processors analyzed the target. No power signatures. No heat signatures above the ambient cold of space. No engine residue. The metallic composition matched common hull alloys from 100 different ship types in the field. The object's tumble was consistent with a fragment that had broken off years ago. For 10 long seconds, the drone studied the dead shuttle. Day held his breath. He could feel the deep cold seeping into his bones. He could hear Velt's teeth chattering softly over the COMM Staten. The drone retracted its arm. It gave one final sweeping scan, and its thrusters glowed. It turned away, resuming its wider patrol pattern, gliding back into the shadows of the debris. They waited. For a full 5 minutes, Day waited, floating in the dark and the deepening cold. He could no longer feel his toes. Velt's breathing had become ragged. "It's gone," Velt finally whispered, the words slurred by cold dots. Slowly, carefully, Day reached out. He did not power the shuttle back to life. That could still be detected. Instead, he used a manual, physical switch to connect the cold cell battery directly to the laser communicator for one single, pre-programmed burst. He pressed the button. A needle-thin beam of light, invisible to the naked eye, lanced out from the shuttle, carrying every byte of their collected data straight to the Resolve. "Message sent," Day said, his voice weak. "Now, let's get a little heat back before we freeze solid. Minimal power. Just enough to keep our blood from icing." As a faint trickle of warmth returned to their suits, they sat in the dark, looking at each other. They had looked the trap in its single red eye, and they had not blinked. The proof was now racing back to their ship. They had been a silent, dead fish in the dark water, and the hunter had passed them by. The mission was a success, but the real battle was just beginning. The data burst from the shuttle was a silent scream in the void. On the bridge of the Resolve, it appeared on Commander Kim Hana's screen as a flashing packet of raw information. She opened it. There it was, the crisp thermal signature, the clear magnetic pulse of gravitic stabilizers, the location. Lee Day had been right. A Crother dreadnought, a ship of immense power, was hiding in the debris, a spider in the center of its web. The attack patterns were the silk strands, designed to vibrate and draw in the prey. Hana felt no triumph. Only a cold, hard certainty. "Tactical confirmation," she announced, her voice cutting through the tense quiet of the bridge. "Dreadnought-class vessel, hiding in Theta 7. The trap is verified." Security Chief Rorg let out a low growl that was almost approval. "The human's ghost is real. Now we hunt the hunter." Alara looked up from her datapad. The traditional response would be to withdraw and call for a full battle group. "The dreadnought outguns us. By the time a battle group arrives, the dreadnought will be gone," Hana said. "It will vanish back into the galactic dark, and this trap will be sprung somewhere else, on someone else." She looked at the main viewer, at the deadly puzzle laid out before them. Lieutenant Day understood the shape of the trap. We will use that same understanding to spring it backward. On them. She turned to Day's empty tactical station. His login was still active. She called up his historical files, the overlapping maps of human strategy. The crew watched her, uncertain. Then she began to speak, weaving Day's insight into a new plan. "The trap works because it expects a direct, logical response. See the attacks, guard the supply line. So we give them a direct, logical response, but it will be an illusion." She pointed to the screen. "We create a sensor ghost of the Resolve and the Stone Fist, using our comms drones and pattern emitters. We make it look like we are taking the bait, coming right down the patrol vector. Meanwhile, the real Resolve goes dark and silent. We move here." Her finger traced a path that skirted the densest debris, a route marked by severe gravitational eddies and sensor scattering. "It's a navigational nightmare. No ship of our size is supposed to go that way, which is why they won't be looking for us there." Velt, who had just returned to the bridge with Day, both of them still pale from the cold, studied the path. Their feathers, which had finally relaxed, puffed up again. The gravity shear in that corridor. It could tear the hull plating right off. The calculations must be perfect. Then make them perfect, Hannah said, her eyes on the pilot. You just drifted a shuttle into a dreadnought's face. You can do this. Velt gave a determined chirp and bent over their console. Rorg frowned at the proposed route. It is a path for a knife, not a sword. We will not be able to bring all weapons to bear. We will be blind for moments at a time. We'll have one shot, Hannah agreed. One point-blank volley into their power core before they know we're there. That is the decisive blow from Day's history books. We're just moving it from their hand to ours. Day, now back at his station, was running simulations. His fingers were stiff with cold, but they moved. The sensor ghost will hold for 20 minutes. After that, their internal scans will see through it. We have to be in position and ready to fire in 18. Then we move now, Hannah ordered. What followed was a ballet of silence and deception. The Resolve launched a cluster of small drones. They spread out, emitting carefully crafted sensor signatures that perfectly mimicked the cruiser and the Tarkellen frigate. To any listener, it sounded like two warships powering up their engines and moving boldly into the trap. The Resolve itself, however, went utterly quiet. All non-essential systems were powered down. The main engines were off. They used only tiny, low-emission directional thrusters. Nudging the massive ship onto the dangerous new path Velt had plotted. It was a terrifying journey. The ship groaned as gravitational tides pulled at its frame. Alerts flashed on the engineering console, warning of stress fractures. The crew worked in whispers, as if sound itself could give them away. They slipped between two massive, tumbling asteroids, so close that the rocky surfaces filled the viewports. They drifted through a cloud of metallic dust that scattered their own sensor picture, leaving them blind for 3 long minutes. Through it all, they watched the feed from the sensor ghosts. On his screen, the fake Resolve sailed serenely into the kill zone. And right on cue, deep in the debris field, the hidden dreadnought began to power up. Its massive energy signature bloomed on their passive scanners like a small sun igniting. It was moving, turning its colossal guns toward the decoy. They've taken the bait, Day reported, his voice a hushed monotone. Time to firing position? Hannah asked, her own voice just as low. 2 minutes, Velt whispered, their claws gripping the console. The Resolve emerged from behind a final slab-like piece of wreckage. And there it was, the Crother Dreadnought. It was vast, ugly, and covered in spikes and weapon barrels. It was fully lit up, its shields focusing forward toward the decoy. Its back and flank exposed to the silent Resolve that had just crept up behind it. All weapons. Target their primary reactor nexus, Hannah said. The command no longer a whisper, but a clear, sharp order. Fire. Every plasma cannon, every missile battery on the Resolve spoke at once. A storm of energy and metal crossed the short distance and slammed into the dreadnought's unprotected flank. The first volley shattered its shields. The second volley pierced its thick armor. The third tore into its heart. The dreadnought shuddered. Internal explosions rippled along its length, venting atmosphere and fire into the vacuum. It listed, dead in space, its weapons dark before they could even turn to face the real threat. On the bridge of the Resolve, there was no cheer. There was a profound shared release of breath. They watched the giant die in silence. Later, in the briefing room, the mood was different. The air still felt cold and dry, but the fear was gone. Rorg stood before Lee Day. The huge Tarkellen looked down at the human, then placed a fist over his own heart in a warrior's salute. You fight with the mind of a great pack leader, Rorg said. Your silence was not weakness. It was the quiet before the storm. I was wrong to doubt it. Day, uncomfortable with the praise, simply nodded. You fought the storm. I just saw the clouds coming. Elara approached, her datapad in hand. My report will state that the victory was due to applied Zenehistory, using the tactical anthropology of a crew member to anticipate and counter enemy strategy. It is a new category, but it fits. As the others left, Hana stayed with Day. He was looking at the now clean main viewer, his face thoughtful. A field guide to treachery? Hana asked, repeating his words from earlier. Day smiled, a small, tired thing. Something like that. They used a page from our oldest book against us. We just had to remember how to read it. Hana looked at her quiet tactical officer. The galaxy was vast and full of unknown threats. They would face more battles, more puzzles. But she knew now that one of her greatest weapons was not a plasma cannon or a shield generator. It was this man's silence, and the 10,000 years of human cunning that lived within it. The first red flag he had raised was not a warning of failure, but a signal that he was listening to a dangerous past so they could all survive the future.